Welcome to another episode of Modern Western Buddhism. My name is Jared Jones, and we are covering the topic of how to cultivate calm abiding meditation as a layperson who will not be entering into very extended retreat. And last time we discussed the issue of boundaries, right? We discussed the issue of how to do retreat in the midst of your ordinary activities. And so essentially, the main point is this. If you're trying to do retreat in the midst of your ordinary activities, what does this mean? This means creating boundaries on your activities, right? So a boundary is any type of limit that you place on your body, your speech, or your mind. So if you're creating boundaries for the purpose of trying to attain calm abiding meditation, then those boundaries should be concordant with the type of result that you're trying to achieve. So yes, even if you have a full-time job, even if you're managing your household with a husband, wife, children, a dog, whatever, you have time and capability to do retreat, because all you need to do is set boundaries on your ordinary activities in such a way that it supports the training that you're doing. So one way of doing that is by, for a week or 2 weeks or a month, just cutting off certain types of distracting activities that are the most distracting for you personally. And during that same time, filling up the extra time you've gained because of not binge watching Netflix, or not playing video games, or not, doing whatever it is you would normally do to distract yourself. And instead doing an extra session or 2 sessions of seated meditation or contemplation practice or intensive study of some Dharma topic, whatever the case may be. So you can do a retreat in the midst of your ordinary life quite easily, actually. And then as a more generalized condition, you need to begin making your ordinary activity more and more aligned with the type of result that you're trying to create. So if you're burning, raping, and pillaging in your ordinary activity, it's going to be very difficult to then sit down and think that, well, even though my mind is absolutely insane for 8 to 12 hours a day, I'm going to sit down for 5 minutes and try to put my mind somewhere and make it do what I want. And it's just going to do that. I mean, it's absurd. It's really absurd when you think about it. So last time we covered a few really exemplary examples in my mind of those in particular aligned with the Zen tradition, who took what seems to be a fairly ordinary path through life, getting married, having children, working a full-time job, etc., and using the conditions of ordinary life as a support for their meditative training and as a support for deepening their realizations that had been gained in meditation, or wherever those deep insights were gained for them in this lifetime. So one example was Yanagi Soetsu. If you haven't read The Unknown Craftsman, I would highly recommend it. His work is really exceptional. Another example was Masanobu Fukuoka, whose method is the farming of not farming method, basically the do nothing farming method. And then we also briefly talked about O-sensei, who's the founder of Aikido, and we talked briefly about sushi chef Ono Jiro, who has a wonderful documentary on Netflix, Jiro Dreams of Sushi, that I would highly recommend. So the next subject is ethics, keeping pure vows and ethics, right? So let me get transitioned over here. Give me a moment. Okay, so keeping pure vows and ethics. Why is this important for meditation, right? Why would you need to control what your body and your speech are doing if you're trying to do something with your mind? Why is that related or relevant? Well, stop and think about this for a moment. Oh, in what universe do you think it would be possible that your body, which is the most obvious thing, the most easily controllable thing for you in the world, in the entire universe, right? It would be completely out of control, right? You can't control your impulses to do anything with your body. Your body's just running around, uh, basically out of control. But you're going to accomplish a state of mind in which your mind, which is much subtler than the body, does exactly what you want it to do when you want it to do it for as long as you want it to do so. It's just silly, right? If you can't get your body to do what you want it to do, there's basically no chance that you're going to get your mind to do what you want it to do, because the body is following the mind, but the body is the most obvious and controllable element of your reality. Also, your speech, right? If you can't control the impulses related to your speech, how are you going to control your mind? And the much subtler activity that we're trying to get our hands on, it's not feasible, right? So you have to have some control, at least, over the impulses that are driving your speech and the habits you have with your speech. So in the Buddhist tradition, this is handled in a number of different ways. With regards to, if you were actually becoming a Buddhist sort of formally, you would take a refuge ceremony and there'd be refuge commitments, and those involve certain ways of sort of interacting with and handling the main elements of Buddhist practice, which are the Buddha, the Dharma, which is the teachings of the Buddha, and the realizations that can be gained, the mental realizations that can be gained from those teachings, and the Sangha, which is the ordained members of the Buddhist community, and more profoundly, those who actually have realizations of the teachings that the Buddha taught. Yes? So, one element of ethics and vows is basically relating with the sources of truth in your reality in such a way that is concordant with what they're giving you, right? They're giving you the answer to everything. They're giving you the way to get out of the problem that you're currently in. So if you don't relate with those properly, you're not creating the right type of psychological momentum to actually get out of the problem that you're stuck in. Also, at a minimum, you need to be keeping pratimoksha vows. These are vows of individual liberation. These are sort of the most basic form of ethics that one finds in Buddhism, but also the most foundational. So that's not killing, and that includes not killing things like insects. It also includes not asking people to kill bugs and insects and so on your behalf, not stealing, not committing sexual misconduct, not lying, which is the most important actually of all five of these vows. When you read the Jataka tales, the Buddha in the Jataka tales does everything else. Well, maybe not drinking. I'm not sure. I'd have to double check. But he kills, and I believe he steals. I believe that he commits sexual misconduct, but he doesn't ever lie. Why? Because you need your discernment of reality to be absolutely perfect, right? So lying has to come under control. So just for clarification, I haven't read the entire canon of the Jataka tales, but it has been said by others that the Buddha did absolutely everything else in terms of ethics wrongly, except not lying. That's the only thing he didn't do in all of his past lives while he was training to become a Buddha. So sincerity, truthfulness, honesty, straightforwardness are extremely important in the process of training your mind. There are other types of vows and commitments you can make. One-day Mahayana vows, which you can take for multiple days. Bodhisattva vows, which are much more sophisticated, complicated, and difficult to keep. And then tantric vows, which are the most sophisticated and the most difficult to keep. So much so that even some of the greatest yogis of all time have said things like, my pratimoksha vows I keep purely, my bodhisattva vows I break occasionally, and my tantric vows I break like falling rain. So some of these vows are much easier to keep than others. While you're trying to attain stabilizing meditation, in particular, it's important that you keep your vows and commitments purely. If you don't have vows and commitments, then to try to maintain an ethical lifestyle is extremely important. And I'm going to cover in great detail why that is the case. For the Buddhists in the room, we could talk a bit about purification. If you break your vows, you break your commitments, even if you do it just because you forgot temporarily that you were holding that vow or that commitment, you should do some type of purification practice. And I don't want to bog down this discussion with a full description of purification, but in Buddhism, purification isn't like some weird ritual you do when you've become ritually impure, as in some other religious traditions. This is specifically related to generating the exact opposite type of mental activity that is opposed to whatever it was that you had done. So the general type of purification, the most important element of the purification, are these two mental states, right? Regret and resolve. Why? Well, regret is not guilt. Guilt means, oh, I'm so bad. I did a terrible thing. Look at me, poor me, right? It's this sort of self-absorbed, I'm the most terrible person kind of feeling. Regret is not like that. In Buddhist psychology, guilt is seen as a completely useless, sort of self-absorbed mind that doesn't do anything. It doesn't actually change your behavior. Regret, on the other hand, is extremely positive. Why? Regret looks at some action, right? It's not looking at you as an atomized, individual, unchanging entity. It's looking at some action you performed and going, that action was completely ineffective. It was completely unharmonious, completely inconcordant with how things are, non-concordant. In other words, it caused harm to others, it caused harm to myself, and it's creating a type of psychological momentum that's going to slow down my training. It has absolutely no redeeming value. If you believe in karmic theory, which we'll cover at some point, I'm sure, then also I've now thrown a brick into the air, and that brick has to come down at some point, and it will be experienced as something that I don't like. If you don't accept karmic theory, then at a minimum, every time you do something sort of negative with your mind, you're creating a certain type of habituated psychological pattern. Everything in our psychology, at least on the surface of our psychology, are all habituated patterns. And what you do, you reinforce, right? It becomes more and more routine, more and more regular. So every time you throw a brick into your psychology that's not concordant with the training that you're doing, at some point you're going to have to deal with that brick. It doesn't go away. It doesn't just stop by itself. It will only get interrupted if you counter it with some other force, right? So the regret is that other force where before you went, wow, this action's a great idea. I'm going to do this thing. And you have some impulse like, yes, I want that. I'm going to go, right? So there's this impulse to go do something or say something. And then, on the other hand, we're looking at the action and we're going, that was terrible. I never want to have the impulse to do this again. I'm going to fight the impulse if it comes up, right? So that's regret. Resolve is I'm resolved to never do this again. I've thought about it, I've looked at it, I analyzed it from 10 different directions. This has no redeeming value. It really hurt everyone involved, and I can't ever do this again. If the impulse comes up, I'm absolutely going to firmly face and avoid this impulse, right? So regret and resolve are the main type of purification that you need. Now, if you're wanting to have a full purification of all of the elements of the action, you need more than that. In particular, if you're Buddhist, you also want to generate refuge, because we have a lot of negative karma related to basically not treating our teachers properly, not treating texts and teachings properly, not treating ordained sangha and other people who are trying to help us develop realization properly in the past. So refuge is the exact opposite of those errors and mistakes. Even if you're not Buddhist, you need compassion. Or if you're Buddhist, you need bodhicitta. Now, compassion is not everyday compassion, it's karuna. In other words, you see the suffering of others and you want to remove that suffering. You take personal responsibility for removing that suffering. Why? Well, part of your motivation for doing some negative action is that you don't care if you cause others suffering. You want to get what you want to get. I'm going to do it. Doesn't matter how it affects you, right? I'm going to get what I want. Screw you, right? So the compassion is the exact opposite of that element of your previous motivation for engaging in the act. Then there's the remedial action. So the remedial action can be any number of sophisticated practices from within the Buddhist purview. That could be Vajrasattva practice, it could be 35 Buddha practice. If you wanted something more general, you could make a donation to a charitable cause. You could clean a local temple or go down to a soup kitchen and do some work down there. Right? So doing some positive deeds that help others. Right? So this then is sort of the final piece where you're really solidifying, all of the elements. Maybe you did something with your body to harm others. So now you're doing something with your body to help others. Right? So this is the final piece of the pie. Or again, if you're on the Buddhist path, you could do something like studying emptiness or studying selflessness, which are the final antidotes to this negative behavior, or a combination of these. In addition to this, you can go back to the people that you've hurt, make an apology, try to make amends with those people in particular. Sort of all the practical elements can be done here as well. Okay, so now let's get into why exactly and how exactly ethics and vows support training in stabilizing meditation. So ethics in Buddhism are naturalistic. That means that there wasn't like some deity from on high who said, here are your ethics, they will rain down on you and now you have to do all of... No. So ethics in Buddhism is looking at reality, seeing how reality actually is, and behaving in a way that concords with the way that reality actually is. Right? That's it. It's not that there's some deity or deva or enlightened being who said this is how it is and this is how it has to be, and just shut up about it and do it, otherwise you go to hell. It's not like that. It's that if you already had a realization of how things are in reality through training and meditation, and then using that meditative capability to look at reality and see it as it is, this is how you would behave almost all the time. There are some exceptions where you might do something else when it was really beneficial for others, to steal or to kill or something, right? There may be conditions like that. But in general, almost all the time, this is how you would behave. You would not kill. You wouldn't steal. You wouldn't commit any kind of sexually abusive or sort of degenerate kind of sexual act. You wouldn't lie. You wouldn't speak harshly to others. You wouldn't maliciously try to divide groups of people by creating conflicts or sustaining conflicts that already exist. You wouldn't waste time just chit-chatting about things that make you angry or that make you really excited, because that's not how your mind works anymore. You wouldn't harm some type of will to harm other people, right? Ill will. You wouldn't have this sort of sneaky desire to acquire things that belong to other people. And obviously, because you see reality as it is, you would no longer hold viewpoints that don't concord with how reality really is. So that's ethics in a nutshell in Buddhism. It's not something from on high. This is just how you would behave if you saw reality as it is. This is how your body would mostly engage with the world, how your mouth would mostly engage with the world, and how your mind would mostly engage with the world. So, living within these guidelines prior to having the realization creates momentum towards the realization, right? It's not quite fake it till you make it. It's more like you're just not doing things that get in the way of you seeing the natural condition, right? You're doing a lot less of the stuff that's getting in the way of you seeing reality as it is. Why? Because you're doing all these things that aren't concording with reality because you don't see reality as it is. So by fighting the impulse to chase all these actions that come from not seeing reality as it is, you're doing damage to the process of not seeing reality as it is. So in a sort of practical way then, now that we've talked about the big picture, right, the big theoretical picture, how does this relate precisely to attaining calm abiding? What is the precise relationship? The precise relationship that's very easy to get your hands around is this. Let's say that you have the impulse to lie, right? You have the impulse to lie, and you've taken a vow or you've made a personal commitment not to lie under any condition. Because you have that vow or that personal commitment due to your training, the impulse to lie comes up, and you go, oh man, if I just lie about this, I'm not going to have to deal with all the nonsense that would come up if I told the truth, right? And that's mostly what it is. We just don't want to deal with the BS that we'll have to deal with if we told someone the truth. So we have this, our own self-interest, right? Oh, I don't want to deal with it. I don't want the consequences, so I'm going to make something up. We see that impulse very clearly and we go, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to chase this impulse. I'm going to do something else, right? What are you going to do? Maybe you tell the truth instead, right? That's one way to go. Maybe you change the subject if telling the truth isn't appropriate at that time. Sometimes there are things you don't need to tell somebody at a particular time, or maybe you just don't say anything, right? Buddhism is not like radical transparency, radical honesty. It's just, you tell the truth when it's helpful to tell the truth. When it's not helpful to tell someone the truth, you don't lie and make things up just to be nice. You change the subject or you don't say anything, right? Those are your options. Or, I don't know. At the same time, you don't want to lie by omission, right? We're not saying that you just omit things and to make things copacetic, right? But sometimes somebody asks you a certain question and you think about it for a second and you answer a different question than they asked. And that for them is fine at the time, right? So when you make the commitment not to lie, you'll get more skillful at talking to people without lying. and without omitting things that need to be known or need to be said. And you'll get better at saying things that are difficult in ways that don't offend or upset people. But in any case, what happened in that particular moment? You had the impulse that came up to lie. You saw the impulse. You decided to pursue a different course. Now, what was going on mentally when all of that happened? Well, there was something in your mind that's constantly watching the speech, right? There's some mental factor that's constantly watching your speech as you talk that noticed, oh, there's an impulse here. I'm about to lie, right? That mental factor that noticed and is watching all the time is called vigilance, right? Vigilance. This term is a technical term from Buddhist psychology. Sometimes it's translated as introspection. Very recently, 2021, I think it was recently translated by Thupten Jinpa as meta-awareness or just awareness in some texts, or all sorts of words. We're going to cover that later in the text. But in any case, just know for now that there is a mental factor, there is a component of your mind that is watching your body, speech, and mind and seeing what's going on at all these levels all the time. And when you make a commitment not to lie, for example, then you turn up the volume on that mental factor and you make it stronger because now you're watching your speech all the time. Oh, am I actually being honest? Right? In addition to that, there was another mental factor, right? You went, oh, I remember I made this commitment not to lie. Okay, I was watching this video by this dumb guy on the internet, and he told me that instead of lying, I can just change the subject, or I can just not say anything, or I can do this or that so that I can kind of skillfully get out of the circumstance without lying and without omitting important information, blah, 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 right? So what did you do? You remembered something. So there's a mental factor called sati, which is recollection or remembrance, and it encompasses both working memory or short-term memory and long-term memory, right? Why? Mindfulness, recollection. Mindfulness, I think, is the worst translation for this term, but it's the one that's most popular. So the better term is recollection or non-forgetfulness, right? You don't forget something, or you recall something at the right time. So you're watching your speech, you're about to lie, the impulse to lie comes up, and now there's this active mental factor, recalling in the moment, I'm not going to lie. I remember from a long time ago, which is the long-term component, right? That somebody said I shouldn't do this if I want to attain calm abiding. Now, what are my options? Blah, blah, blah. Accessing long-term memory. And then in the midst of all of this, you're actively doing something in the present moment and not forgetting what you're trying to do. What you're trying to do in the current moment is tell the truth, right? So remembrance, sati, recollection, has both long-term memory and short-term memory components to it. Now, why are these two mental factors important, vigilance and mindfulness? Because these are the two mental factors that allow you to attain calm abiding. You have to cultivate both of these to a great degree in order to get your mind to stay where you want it to, when you want it to, for as long as you want it to, with all of the attendant qualities that we will discuss at great length later on, right? So ethics very directly encourages the cultivation of vigilance and recollection. Once you've taken vows, you're cultivating vigilance and recollection almost all the time. In addition to this, you're building up the force of your intention, right? Because it takes a certain force of intent when an impulse comes up to do something that you've done a lot of, like tell a white lie, or to do something you've done a lot of, like swatting a bug on your arm or whatever, right? killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, whatever it may be. It takes a lot of force of mind, if you have a strong habit of doing that, to not do it. If you're really terrified of insects and a little bug lands on your arm, your instinct might be to give it a really big whack, right? As quickly as you can, out of strong fear. So to have the vigilance to go, oh, there comes the fear. Yep, I see the fear. The fear is really strong. And the mindfulness to go, oh yeah, there was this video I watched, and if I kill, that's going to throw a brick in the air and blah, blah, blah. And then my calm abiding training is going to get slowed down. And then I'm going to have to do some kind of weird purification thing to get all the antidotes right, so that I blah, blah, right? And in a few moments to recall all that information and to go and blow the bug away instead of swatting it or whatever, right? Requires quite a force of will, because you have a strong habit, and with that habit comes not only just the impulse to do something, but usually a strong motivation of some kind: fear, attachment, hatred, pride, whatever it is. So ethics forms the basis of mindfulness, introspection, or vigilance and recollection, my preferred translations, so that you can basically work on developing these two mental factors all the time. Obviously, you also need strong motivations, right? You need strong motivations for your ethics, which once again is going to tie back into the motivation sections we already talked about. Now, there's another important element here. This is talked about a lot more in the Pali tradition. But if you chase after your own unethical behavior, then you have to deal with doubt, fear, confusion, guilt, regret because of those behaviors, right? Like if you cheat on someone, or if you rip off your business partners, or if you quit a restaurant right in the middle of the busiest night of the year and you take all the you know, the tickets out of the kitchen so that the kitchen loses all the, you know, all the orders and they don't know what food's going to what tables, and right, like you really try to hurt them on the way out the door. Now, because you chase that impulse to basically pursue your own interest and to get back at people, now you have to deal with the fear of reprisal, right? Are these people going to come back and try to hurt me? Am I going to be able to get hired in this town again now that I've done something really stupid on my way out the door of a major restaurant here in town? Is anyone ever going to work with me again now that I've ripped off my business partners and everybody knows it? Are my business partners going to sue me? Are they going to hire thugs to come to my house and pop my car tires? You know, whatever kind of thoughts you're inclined to are going to come up. Usually some type of fear out of your own self-concern. Doubt, oh, how do I handle this? You know, oh man, I cheated on this person and now they found out, and you know, how do I handle this? I've got kids with this person, but I really love that person, blah, blah, right? And so now you have to deal with all the doubts, all the uncertainty, all the confusion, which way to go because of your unethical behavior, right? And then usually, because we're not very well trained, there's guilt in spades, right? If you have a normal conscience, usually we have lots of guilt and not very much regret. We need to change that. But the guilt comes up and you go, oh, you know, I can't believe I ripped those people off. I'm a terrible person. Me is so bad. I'm so bad, right? And all of this is going to interrupt your training in meditation. Even the regret, which is a positive mental factor, right, will interrupt your training in meditation. Because if you have strong regret, oh, that action was so stupid. I can't believe I did that. Now I'm going to have to deal with the confusion and the this and the that, and I threw a brick in the air that's going to come down later, and all of this, right? So the regret also interrupts your ability to just calmly rest on the object. So engaging in non-virtue has a tendency to give rise to all sorts of other things just because your life is out of order, right? And you've hurt other people and they might come back and hurt you, blah, blah, blah. So not only do ethics sort of create the internal conditions that you need, vigilance, mindfulness, etc., but they also help you avoid just the normal BS of life that comes up when you do things to hurt other people, right? When you hurt other people, your life has less peace and harmony, and therefore you have to deal with more mental chit chat related to these horrible things that you've done. And that's a big, big problem in terms of training your mind in meditation. So avoiding those circumstances helps you avoid all of that. The Pali tradition also recommends silence, and there's a lot of meditative traditions that recommend silence, and this is one of the big reasons that you go into retreat, right? Now, if you're not going to go into silent retreat or not going to maintain pure silence, then economy in your speech is a nice way of putting it. Saying less is good, says the guy who can't stop talking. Saying less is good, right? Why? Saying less is good because mostly our impulse to talk comes from chasing either uh, either aversion or raga, attachment, right? We're either chasing sort of not liking or we're chasing liking, chasing really wanting something or really wanting to get rid of something, really chasing hating the other political party, really chasing loving our own political party, right? And so by chasing all of these emotional states and drives over and over and over again, you probably know, you go for a family gathering and you sit down for Thanksgiving or Christmas dinner or whatever the equivalent gathering is for you. And by the end of the evening, you're exhausted, absolutely exhausted, because everybody's been talking about the gossip and oh, this person did that and I really hated it. And, then they didn't apologize and, right? Or, even if you're excited and happy for the other person, listening to somebody talk for like an hour about their newest love interest at some point gets a little tiring, right? So too much talking where you're chasing every emotional reaction over and over and over again is going to be a problem. When you try to sit down to hold your mind on some object, your mind is going to continue chasing. Oh, I want this, I don't want this, I want this, I don't want this, right? So reducing that habit has a benefit to the training that you're doing. Also, they say it's good, in particular while you're training in meditation, but just in general, to not spend too much time pointing out the faults of other people. Why? Well, first of all, people don't like that very much, generally. Uh, Secondly, it creates a lot of conflict quite often to point out other people's faults, and in particular when you find out somebody has a particular fault and you know that oh, this other person doesn't like people that are like that, so I'm going to go tell them that this person's really this person's really in this way that you don't like, so you two probably shouldn't spend time together, right? And so then harsh ways of thinking and talking about others then become divisive, right? Where you're going, oh, how can I divide these people from each other? I'd really prefer that these two don't talk. So all this sort of drama that you create in your life by speaking harshly and dividing people and backbiting and gossiping is the exact opposite of the mental state you're trying to create in meditation. So if you do less of that in your ordinary life, it will be easier, right? Much easier when you sit down to put the mind in a state where it's not chasing after all these distracting kinds of things. There's a sort of folkloric tale about how the term sincere developed in the English language. In the Renaissance era, sculptors who were working with stone, right? They would put wax over any imperfections on their statues. Because I mean, if you've been working for 6 months on a statue and you have a small mistake, much easier to just put some wax on it than start over. So in Spanish, the word for wax was cera, right? And so you'd use that for covering up defaults, mistakes, and defects, mistakes, and faults. However, if you took that statue and you put it out in the sun, the heat of the sun would melt the wax and then you would see all the problems, right? And human beings are exactly the same way. As soon as you put a human being under a little bit of pressure, whatever sort of fake face they've put on will melt. And all of their normal sort of difficult faults of character in these things will come out. So if you put someone in a challenging circumstance that triggers whatever their problems are, for most people, their problems are going to come out, right? So well-crafted sculptures and statues and so on became known as sincera, or without wax, no wax, right? And then over time, we developed this English word sincere. So similarly, we should be sincere without wax, without trying to hide our faults and shortcomings and defects and mistakes. In general, we should just be in the sun the way that we are. Now, this doesn't mean that we sort of proudly go, oh yeah, I'm the worst student of so and so, and I've been kicked out more times than anybody, and whatever, right? Like, it's not that you're proud of this, which is the weird Western psychology thing, right? You're not trying to become proud of being the most ignorant person in the room. You're just saying, yeah, I really don't know anything about that. Instead of neurotically running around trying to convince people that you know everything about it when you don't, right? That's it. Or when you made a mistake, you don't neurotically run around trying to convince everyone that you don't make any mistakes and it was actually this person over there, and that promotion should be mine, and this other guy, he really screwed that thing up. Don't you remember, he did like 7 things? My thing's almost nothing. Matter of fact, my thing is nothing. All these weird sort of justifications are the opposite of the mental state that you're trying to create in meditation. So we need to be without wax. We need to be sincere. If you want to be able to see clearly what's going on in your mind, you need to stop making up bullshit stories about who you are, what you're doing, how all of your nonsense and ways of hurting people are actually completely justified, right? If you're doing all of that, you can't see it the way that it is. So you need to stop doing that externally. Because not doing it with your body and your speech is much easier than not doing it internally in your own mind. So that your internal dialogue starts to go, oh yeah, oh wow, there's that stupid habit I have of being really distracted. There it is again. Oh yeah, okay. Oh, there's that habit I have of watching too much television. Okay, yep, I see it. There's the whatever, right? So when you make this change and you basically aren't afraid of the sunlight anymore, right? When you can look at your own faults and shortcomings honestly, with brutal honesty, really, then you can start to focus all of your attention on actually solving the internal problems that are stopping you from gaining meditative realization. Before you do this, before you sort of loosen up a bit and say, hey, look, yeah, I'm not perfect. Not only am I not perfect, but like I have X, Y, and Z problems, and it's okay if you know that. It's okay if anybody finds out, because that's how it actually is. But guess what? I'm working on that, And then when other people point it out, you go, oh yeah, I am arrogant. Yeah, I've noticed that, and I'm working on it. But it still catches me by surprise sometimes. Sometimes I don't see it in the moment when I'm being really arrogant. So thank you for letting me know, right? And so now there's a genuine process of mental transformation going on all the time, instead of just 5 minutes a day when you're sitting on your cushion. So strictly avoid self-justification and basically having this neurotic pattern of trying to hide all of your faults and mistakes from other people. That needs to go if you're trying to gain meditative capability. The symptoms of this are that you'll lie to people, you will exaggerate things, you will under-exaggerate or sort of deflate things, right? Oh, yeah, years ago I was arrogant. Years and years and years. Oh, way, way back. I was a little arrogant, when I was a kid. A little. No, you were a prick. You were among the worst of pricks, right? And you need to be honest with yourself about how bad it was. You need to be honest with others about how bad it was. If you can't do that, then you're not seeing it how it was, right? And pretension. Pretension's also really bad. Pretension is the worst is when you think you have qualities that you don't have. But pretension is when you try to make it out for other people as though you had certain qualities. Oh, I'm a great meditator, didn't you know? Yes, I can sit for 5 hours a day. I mean, who cares? If you can sit for 3 hours a day or 5 hours a day, completely still, unmoving, but your mind is a wreck, and the rest of the time you act like a dick to everybody, then your meditation is not worth much. Maybe you shouldn't be bragging about this. Just sitting still is not meditation. The mind needs to be still. But I digress. So this type of way of covering up your faults and negative stuff is poison. It's poison if you want to train your mind. You have to purge this poison from your behavior, from your attitude. In particular, if you're involved in some kind of community where there's training going on, you need to be brutally honest with yourself about what your capabilities are, what your knowledge is, where you're at in the process, and you need to be forthright, honest, straight up and down with others about your current capabilities. If you are a sack of potatoes in terms of your capabilities, then that's what you need to tell people. Don't pretend like you have a bunch of capabilities you don't have just because somebody told you to teach a beginner's course on meditation, right? Don't do that. Don't do that. That's poison for your training, and it's poison for their training. In particular, do not hide your faults from your teachers, from your mentors. If you hide your faults from your teachers and mentors, that is the death of your training. If your teacher or mentor, if you're extremely lucky, and your teachers or your mentors have the clairvoyance, have the capability to look at your mind directly and see what's going on, and I've quite fortunately had 2 teachers like this, then they just call you out on your bullshit anyway. They go, oh yeah, you think you're hot shit, you think you know this, you think you can do that, but you can't do anything. And they talk to you like that, they don't talk to you in koans and riddles and nonsense. They just straight up, they're like, oh yeah, gosh, you're so full of shit. Right? If you can handle it. If you can handle being talked to like an adult, they'll talk to you like an adult. Without pretension, without elaborate words. They'll talk to you directly about your faults, your difficulties, your challenges. And that's a huge blessing. Huge blessing, because now they give you insight on how to actually start to transform the mind, move the mind, get rid of the ways in which you're sabotaging yourself in your training, right? There's nothing better than this. If your teachers don't have the ability to see directly into your mind, the more that you hide from them, the less they can help you. So you need to be honest. Again, it comes back to the honesty thing. This is why honesty is the bedrock. If you can't be honest with yourself and honest with your teachers at a minimum, you're stuck in a big way. You are majorly stuck. So sincerity, honesty, openness about who you are, what capabilities you have, what capabilities you don't have is the bedrock, the absolute bedrock. If you're worried about uh, if you're worried about leaning too far in one direction, it's better to lean in the direction of thinking, you know, what I've experienced probably isn't so profound, right? It's better to downplay your capabilities to yourself in your own mind and to compare yourself against the very best, right? Read some of the biographies of the very best meditators, yogis, the difficulties they went through, the training they went through, how hard they worked, how many hours they put in. Compare yourself against those and go, yeah, I'm kind of lazy and I don't do much. And even if you're doing 12 hours a day, compared to them, you're not doing much. So that's fine. And then when your teachers ask what you're up to, you say, oh, you know me, I'm not doing much. But then you can tell them what you're doing. And they might even say, well, that's actually quite a bit. And you can say, well, yeah, but look at Milarepa. Milarepa was doing 24 hours a day without sleeping for years at a time. Look at Lama Zopa. Lama Zopa today. Maybe he takes a small nap here and there, but who knows what he's doing with his mind when his eyes are closed and he's sitting up on his meditation cushion because he doesn't even have a bed, right? Who knows? Compared to them, I'm not doing much. That's fine. Right? So it's better to err on the side of thinking, in reality, I'm sort of a middling practitioner at best. Or maybe I'm not even a middling practitioner. Maybe I'm among the practitioners, but I'm somewhere in the lowest rung of the training. That's much better than thinking, oh, I'm one of the special ones. I'm one of the big ones, right? I'm going to be great. Okay. So what did we cover today? We covered retreat in the midst of life and formalized living outside of retreat. And then we covered ethics in some sort of general way as it relates to training and meditation. We talked about it in relation to Buddhist training, where you have the refuge commitments, you have bodhicitta commitment. If you're Buddhist, you probably already know what that is, or a bodhicitta component, in addition to a compassion component, which is more general. We talked about how you use purification, i.e., generating the opposite type of mind to counteract some sort of force in your mental continuum, right? We talked about the way in which ethics in Buddhism is a naturalistic form of morality, not based upon sort of revelation from above raining down what ethics and morality should be for everyone, but rather looking at reality, seeing how it is, and behaving in accordance with how it is, and how that supports meditation. We talked about that in a general way, but then we also talked about how specifically in the moment when some impulse comes up to chase after some unethical activity, that you have to use two mental factors to counteract that. You have to use vigilance and you have to use recollection, right? And you have to employ your intention. Oh, you have to employ your intention, which won't be selected for some reason, right? So your mind is basically you're intending to never lie again. And now you're having to maintain that intention with mindfulness and vigilance all the time, at all waking hours. And if you're pretty good, maybe also in your dreams, you may, while you're dreaming, dream that you're in a bar and you're about to take a drink, and then you go, oh, I have a vow not to drink in the bar in your dream. It's also good, right? Because now in your dream, you're cultivating vigilance, and mindfulness and the force of your intent, which is good. It's good for your meditative training. Secondly, if you chase around all types of harmful activities, there are going to be real world consequences for those. And those real world consequences are going to create doubt, fear, confusion, probably if you have a normal conscience, guilt. And if you've done some training, instead of guilt, you'll have a lot of regret, which will also interrupt your meditative training in the short term. We talked a bit about how basically talking less, having some economy in your speech, if you're not in retreat, can be a good thing, because you don't want to constantly be chasing, oh, I really want this, I really don't want this, I really like that, I really don't like this, blah, 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 blah. Really chasing preference all over the place and exhausting yourself. That type of mental activity of chasing preference over and over and over again is the opposite of calm abiding. We also talked about avoiding chasing preference, not just in terms of sort of chit chat, where you're chatting about world events and blah, 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 but in particular pointing out the faults of other people and trying to divide other people and create conflicts between people. Again, these are going to have real world consequences, and by chasing this habit, you're doing the opposite of the mind state that you're trying to generate. We talked about the importance of sincerity, right? Sincerity meaning being without wax, without trying to cover up your faults, shortcomings, mistakes, and so on. If you try to do that, if you try to cover all these things up, slowly, you will start to see yourself in a way that isn't accurate. And you'll start to notice that in your speech, even if you can't see in your own mind, oh, here's what I'm doing. In your speech, you'll notice, oh, you know what? I have this tendency to exaggerate stuff about myself and about other people. I have this tendency to under-exaggerate or deflate things about myself and other people. I have this tendency to sort of subtle way, sort of pretend that I have this capability or that capability or this knowledge or that knowledge when I can get away with it, right? So if you have this self-justifying habit, and we all do, then you'll notice these patterns in your speech. So stop them in your speech first, and then slowly build up the habit of just being open and honest with other people about your limits, your capabilities, your lack of capabilities, your faults, your past mistakes, and just being open and honest about your limitations, blah, blah, blah. Doing the other thing is poisonous, right? If you don't have enough resolution on what's going on in your mind to see what your actual faults and problems are, then there's no way you're going to be able to get your entire mind to focus on one thing that you want it to, stay there as long as you want it to. I mean, it's a joke. So first you have to be able to see your own internal states accurately. To do that, you need to stop making crap up about your internal states. Straightforward. In particular, a good place to start is with your teachers. With your teachers is a great place to start. No more making stuff up about your internal world. Just tell them what's going on as it is. Don't hide things. Don't try to, out of embarrassment, not make it so they don't find out your problems. If you do that, then they can't help you, or they can only help you in a very limited capacity. So, kind of a short video today. Let's see. That is it for today. We had a good conversation about ethics today. If you'd like to make a contribution to the channel or my personal practice, you're welcome to use the link below. The money from that goes exclusively towards supporting my Dharma training activities, my PhD, and supporting charitable causes, usually Buddhist charitable causes. So if you'd like to help out, use the Patreon link below. Otherwise, I really hope that this will help support your mental training activity, and in particular your striving towards samadhi in whichever tradition you happen to be in, Buddhist or non-Buddhist. Thank you for showing up today, and I will see you again soon.